Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be going through the Paragon Active Assurance Multisession TCP Monitor Learning Byte. All right, so let's first look at the topology. In this topology, we have TA1 and TA2, which are both test agents. They connect into the control center using ETH0 through the management network. And then they connect into the service provider network using ETH1. And so with that, what do we want to do? We want to configure a multi-session TCP monitor. And something to keep in mind about the multi-session TCP monitor task is that it uses all available bandwidth. And so you may not want to run this when you have production traffic in a network. It depends on what you need to do, but it's just going to test the available bandwidth. And so we're going to be setting this up between TA1 and TA2. It's going to be 20 connections, and that's just the whole point of a multi-session TCP monitor is the amount of sessions that it allows you to have. And then we're going to use port 5000. It's going to be bidirectional. We're going to have some error seconds thresholds of 15 connections up and down. So if that drops below 15 connections, then it's going to have some error seconds. And if we drop below 100 megabits per second up and down, we're going to have some error seconds. And so with that being said, I want to talk a little bit more about the multi-session TCP monitor and what that is. And we kind of talked about how it creates multiple sessions and how you can gain insight into the performance of your network, that is the available bandwidth that's available. And so typically you have hundreds of sessions that will be commonly initiated between some peer-to-peer software or when browsing certain websites with a lot of different objects. And this uses a standard cubic TCP implementation. And so basically what happens is when the multi-session TCP task starts, the test agent will start the selected number of TCP sessions. In our case, it's going to be 20 sessions. 20 sessions going there and 20 sessions going back. So there'll actually be 40 sessions total, but we'll see that. And so with that, you have to keep that in mind, how many sessions are going to be running. But depending on the amount of sessions and the amount of bandwidth being used, you may want to not do this during production hours because of how intensive of a task this is. So let's go ahead and jump to the Paragon Active Assurance Control Center web interface and get this going. All right, so here is the Control Center web interface for Paragon Active Assurance. And we need to go to Monitor, Create New Monitor, and then we need to name it. We'll call this Multi-Session TCP Monitor LB, short for Learning Byte. And then we need to select the multi-session TCP task. And then here we can see that we're added as a task with the multi-session TCP. And we can rename that if we like, but we don't need to with this. And then we need to select the server. That's going to be TA1 on the ETH1 interface. It's very important we select the right interface. And TA2 on the ETH1 interface. Remember, the ETH1 interfaces for both test agents are pointing towards the service provider core network. And then port 5000, that's fine. And then we need to change the connections to 20 and then change it to bidirectional. Now, if we select it down, it would just do 20 connections for the server to the client. Up would be from the client to the server, obviously. And bidirectional, we're going to have 20 connections going from the client to the server and 20 connections going from the server to the client. And then we need to set the error seconds thresholds. And we can set this to 20. By default, it goes to 10. But no, we want this to 15. That's right. And the down rate, we want this set at 100 megabits per second. And then 15 for the number of connections up. And then 100 as well for the rate in the up direction. So that's in megabits per second. And then we do have a little more under SLA thresholds. This is just your typical monitor thresholds. And so we have good SLA set to 99.95 and acceptable SLA set to 99.5. And so as long as we don't get error seconds for 99.95% of the time, we're going to be in the good SLA, and 99.5% of the time will be the acceptable SLA. And so with that, let's go ahead and start the monitor. And we don't need to start with a report or anything. So we're going to start without reports. And then it will take just a minute to get things going here, as monitors take a minute to get running. And keep in mind that monitors run indefinitely. So if you're running this task as a monitor, the multi-session TCP task as a monitor, then it's going to be using all the available bandwidth indefinitely. And so that might be something you do want or don't want. There's certain scenarios where, yeah, that might be useful. But in many scenarios, that might not be what you want. So if that's the case, if you don't want this to run indefinitely, then you'll want to run this as a test instead of a monitor. And so you can see here that the test has started, and you can see here that everything is green so far. You have light gray on the left and light gray on the right, then that's just no data. So that's perfectly fine. And so you can see right now that we're just getting green, which means that we have no error seconds. You can see here in the rate field that we have 445, 463, 459 rate in megabits per second. That's all the available bandwidth on that line. And then 20 connections, 20 active connections, everything's looking really good. And we can select the individual streams and get more information about that. And you can see what's happening here. Granted, this hasn't been running very long since it is a monitor. You can see that there is no error seconds. You can see the rate in megabits per second. We can also select the active connections. Not that that shows anything different because the number of actual connections versus active connections is steady at 20. So everything looks good there. We can look at in the table view, and you can see there's no errors. So we need to select the show all to get any information. And there we go. I think we saw some pop up there at the end. Okay, so you can see there's no information for a little while. Now we can see there is some information. So that is populating the table as well as the graph. And if we look at the other stream, we'll see something very similar. And you can see no errors. You can see the megabits per second. Everything looks as expected there. There are no problems. And so that's what the multi-session TCP task looks like when you run it as a monitor. And everything looks good. There are no error seconds. And this is what you would hope to see. So that does bring us to the end of this Learning Byte. In this Learning Byte, we demonstrated how to configure and run a multi-session TCP monitor. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.